Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Nice to see you guys. So today we're going to dive into one of my favorite topics, and that would be how we experience love through astrology. And I don't just mean your Venus sign, right? We're going to look at everything that's connected to love, and that is the lens that we're going to be looking at everything through. So we're going to look at the sun, the moon, our rising signs, Venus, Mars, the North and South Node, Chiron. We're going to throw in a couple of asteroids to tell a bit of a deeper story about how it is that we connect, what attracts us, and the lessons that relationships are meant to bring us. So we're going to go planet by planet, and we're going to walk through each one and how it expresses itself, each one through the 12 houses. And of course, we're going to be using the Western Whole House system because that's what I follow. So this video is going to be blending though the psychological side of relationships with the romantic soul level stuff because love isn't just about who we date or how we date, right? It's really more about how we ultimately end up growing through connection. So we understand a little better the purposes behind a lot of the connections that we have, right? So grab your chart, get cozy, get some sort of drink or something, and let's go through each of the placements and look at how they shape our love language and our intimacy style and the emotional patterns that make relationships truly our own, right? Very, very unique to ourselves. All right, so let's get started. We're going to get right into the sun sign, guys. So, just in the name of time, excuse me, and just so you understand how this is going to be working. For those of you who aren't, sure that this is the reality of astrology, that every one of the 12 houses has a landlord and ruler. So every house, the first house, the landlord is Aries. Aries is the sign associated with the first house, and the ruler is Mars of the first house. Second house is associated with Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Okay. So it's very important to understand the house placement of our signs, just as much as it's important to understand, for example, to give you myself as an example, and those of you who've been watching me know this, I'm a Gemini sun, but my sun is in my sixth house, which makes me a Capricorn rising. My sun, my Gemini sun being in the sixth house means that I experience my sun sign through the lens of the sign that's on the sixth house, which would be Virgo. So my sun is in the sign of Gemini. It's experienced through the lens of Virgo. So, to best understand my sign, I don't only look at Gemini, I have to understand Virgo because it really does color the expression and how I experience that. So, that's the deal for all of you, right? So, as I go through each of these houses, you're going to notice I'm going to say, for example, the sun in the first house or Aries. The sun in the second house or Taurus, sun in the third house or Gemini. Okay, so and I'm going to list it like that in the description box, right? So that when you're popping around with your links, okay. So just so you understand how that works, okay. So let's get into the sun sign, and believe me when I tell you, this could easily be a 10-hour video, and just because we're covering a lot of placements, I'm going to try to just kind of get to the heart of the matter and add extra info where I think it needs to be. Okay, so the sun in relationships. Now, again, everything is only being looked at the relationships. So the sun in relationships, let's cover it houses 1 through 12. And remember, the sun shows how you express your core identity and vitality in love and what you need to feel seen as well as respected in partnership. Okay, so that's the angle of the sun in relationship. So let's start off with the first house or Aries. So if your sun is placed in the first house, doesn't matter what sign, or your sun is in Aries, you radiate confidence and independence and love. Partners are drawn to your presence, your authenticity. You need relationships that allow you to be yourself. There's no question about it. You cannot feel too closed in. You want to be seen, you do, but you also need that independence within relationship, okay? Because remember that Aries energy, it's the sign of agency. It's the sign of the warrior, right? Get out of my way. I have stuff to do. Right? That kind of thing. I want what I want when I want it, that kind of thing, right? So that's all that first house energy. And so it's important to understand that you need to be with somebody who sees you, right? Absolutely, but allows you to be yourself. Going into the second house, if your sun is placed in the second house and or Taurus, love and self-worth are interwound. Love and self-worth, they're totally connected. So you can attract partners through stability, loyalty, and sensuality. These are all very Venusian things, right? Because the second house is naturally ruled by Venus. So you need reassurance that you're valued is very important. If you feel undervalued or you feel like you don't have stability within the relationship, it's deeply going to impact you. This is a almost like a non-negotiable when it comes to we're just talking about love here. When it comes to love, you want to feel that stability. It's really a requirement. You'll feel you could get sick. Like if you are in a really toxic relationship where you don't feel stable and secure, you're not feeling valued, it could literally you could feel like almost like your soul is being depleted, like you're becoming parched and thirsty, right, for something. Okay. Now moving on, if your sun is in the third house and or Gemini, relationships thrive through communication, humor, and mental rapport, right? You need curiosity, you need verbal affection, connection, connection, connection. There have to be a lot of words involved. Someone who is just a very poor communicator, they could be a really great individual, no shade on them, but they might not be the best actual connection for you because what can end up happening here is that level of frustration because you're not being communicated in that way is that you can end up looking for things wrong. You can end up stirring up drama where even if you like things to be quite peaceful, it's just like, it's almost like, give me something, right? So somebody who is very introverted, and even in your quiet moments alone, they don't really communicate. That could be very, very difficult for you to feel seen, appreciated, and actually satisfied. Now, moving on to the fourth house, we have it's fourth house. That's what Cancer rules. So, if your sun is in Cancer and or the fourth house, you seek emotional safety and home-centered love. You need that home-centered kind of feeling. Family or private life defines partnership fulfillment. And this is a deep house, right? Because it's the moon and the moon rules our emotions. So very sensitive positioning, but you have to feel seen and appreciated, right? And remember now, Cancer energy, right? Whether your sun is in the fourth house and or in the sign of Cancer, we're talking about an energy that is very sensitive and experiences things through the emotional body rather than any body of facts. Do you know what I mean? Like how it is that you feel becomes your reality. Right. And that's just worth noting when you're in relationship because you could be told, oh, you're so moody, right? Because you're like the moon because it's connected to Cancer, or, why do you always feel so vulnerable? Or, why do you pull away, the second you get a little scared and be like, because I'm a crab, man. That's what crabs do. They get scared, they go in their shell and they do the crabby side shuffle. They'll forgive you, but they don't forget. You forget nothing. If your moon, if your sun rather, is in Cancer or the fourth house, you remember everything, every slight, everything. It doesn't mean you don't forget, but man, do you remember everything, right? And that's worth noting in relationship because you can easily pull something up from like, 10 years ago that, other people maybe sort of let slide out of their consciousness. And you're like, no, I remember, but that is Cancer sun or sun in the fourth house. Now, if your sun is in the fifth house and or Leo, passionate and very passionate and expressive in love, you want romance, you want to feel creative and joyful and love as play and art. And man, is that so important. That whole joyful, sunny, right? Because the fifth house is ruled by the sun, sunny energy, disposition. And it's that lead, that fifth house energy is also like, hey, look at me, right? It's the place and the sign of the entertainer, the person who wants to be noticed and recognized, right? It wants to be seen for being the king or queen of the jungle, to be respected. Now, the challenge here could be when you're in relationship, if you feel like the person that you're with does not want to, and I use this simile a lot, where it's very much like the king or queen of a castle, right? Come and stay in my castle. Come and do what I want to do. Come and stay in my castle. The food is better, the beds are more comfortable. I have, really cool music and movies, and it's great. It's great. If you're with a partner who they just want to stay in their own castle, or they only want to deal with their own constituents, right? Like their own friends, their own family members, and not come hang out in your castle, that could be very, very off-putting to you. So as loving and unconditionally loving and giving, fifth house sun and or Leo sun could be. I mean, they are one thing that's beautiful, and I always say this in relationships, is that if you have a very strong Leo energy in relationships, you are someone who has the ability to see someone that you love, even after they've aged, even after years and years have gone by, to still see the individual who you fell in love with. You have that capacity. Not a lot of people do, but it's like you see it, which is why friendship is terribly important to you in relationship, because there is this innate understanding that looks can fade. I mean, they do. We grow older. Those things don't stay shiny and pretty forever. And you understand that, right? Very strong Leo signs in relationships do understand that, right? The friendship's got to be there. And if that friendship's not there, it's really difficult to hang in there for the long term. It's very difficult, right? But definitely a beautiful placement. Then we go to the sixth house. So the sixth house, if your sun is in the sixth house and or Virgo, you show love through service and reliability. Relationships often form through work or shared routines, or you can end up working with your partner, or you enjoy doing some sort of shared projects. But at the same time, when you're in relationship, you appreciate somebody being reliable. You appreciate somebody actually showing you service to you as well. Not that they're of service to you as in your servant, but if you're doing all of these things, it's not that you're doing the service activities in order to get it back. It's just that you appreciate the reciprocity. So, basic idea, like if I make you dinner, can you like do some yard work or something basic like that, where you will become very sensitive if you are comfortably, by the way, being of service, being of service, being of service. It's fine. You have no problem with that. But when you feel like it's not being given back to you in any way, that would end up being an ultimate point of contention that is inescapable, right? You cannot get away from that. Okay. And then we have the seventh house. Seventh house into a Libra energy. Here, partnerships define your identity. You learn selfhood through others, needing equality and reflection, right? Because that seventh house is the house of mirrors, right? Not the fun house mirrors, it's mirroring. So remember, the seventh house works opposite the first house, which is the house of self. Seven and one work in opposition. Those houses work in opposition. So you're you do seek out in relationship that which either you feel like you're missing, right? You seek that out as a way of feeling a little more whole, or you will seek out parts of yourself that maybe you don't totally love, that you subconsciously wish to heal, right? But because there is that reflection, but you always learn a lot about yourself through others, right? And who you are, right, in your life, it's defined by partnership. Now, even if you're not in a partnership, so it's either, part of your identity is I am me, not in partnership, right? And this is what I'm doing because I'm not in a partnership. It's always sort of the that idea that you are sort of holding your life against that idea of partnership, whether you're in it or not, right? And your ability to feel comfortable in life through partnership. This idea of partnership is super, super central to what it is that you do, which is very, very important, obviously, right? Because the seventh house is the house of long-term contracts, right? Which would be a marriage contract. Like this is the energy of that level of relationship. And then moving on, we have the eighth house into a Scorpio. This is intense, guys. Intense, transformative love. When you have your sun in Scorpio or you have your sun in the eighth house, you merge deeply, 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 very deep water sign. There's needing emotional transparency and intimacy. It's very interesting because I think Scorpios, we could say this about a couple of signs, but I do think that Scorpio kind of has the crown on the bullshit meter, right? And being able to smell it, a mile away. You're very intense, you're very dramatic, you're very honest. You expect there to be transparency. You need that deep intimacy. If somebody's just shallow or they're not really giving of themselves, you know what I'm saying? Very hard for you to be on board with that full throttle. Really difficult, really difficult. Um, but there is also this idea of control. So you can end up being, if you have your sun in the eighth house into Scorpio, you really want to be very controlling in relationship at the end of the day. Now, maybe you aren't, so much so, depends. We're going to talk about Venus, we're going to talk about Chiron, we're going to talk about these other placements, but just as your foundation, because the eighth house, ruled by Pluto, modern ruler Pluto, original ruler Mars, we got a lot of control desire going on there, right? A lot of control desire. So very intense, though. Very sexy energy, by the way, as well, right? Because that eighth house into a Scorpio rules that particular arena. Then we have the ninth house and or Sagittarius energy. If your sun is in the ninth or Sagittarius, love is an adventure of mind and spirit. You crave growth, you crave travel, or even philosophical exploration together. It's that ninth house, third house axis, like you and Gemini, cannot be bored. You can't be bored. It's very difficult to keep your interest if there's any boredom. So it's all about expansion. Now, not everybody can travel, right? We can't travel all the time, but we can travel in our mind. We can travel through different experiences. We can just try different things. It's a very optimistic energy as well. It really is. Even if you struggle with depression, I guarantee you, if you have your sun in Sagittarius enter the ninth house, there is this visceral thread that goes through you that is more optimistic, where perhaps you put the cart before the horse. You want to think that, good things are going to happen, and good things are going to, it doesn't mean that you don't struggle with sadness, anxiety, depression from time to time, but you have that innate automatic sort of positioning that really none of the other signs have it to that degree. Maybe to a little bit of a lesser degree, but still not to the same would be Leo, right? Sagittarius, because you're ruled by Jupiter, that ninth house is ruled by Jupiter, it's very expansive and it's very optimistic and it's very, connected in that way, right? And then we will have moving on to the 10th house into a Capricorn sun. Partnership influence your public path. There's no question. You attract partners who are ambitious or help elevate your reputation in one way or another. But partnerships are very, very connected to your public path. So, how it is that you're known in the world can be very connected to your relationships, or at least that's what you desire. Whether it ends up manifesting for you depends on other things, but that is what at least just that very soul desire is. Then moving on to the 11th house or Aquarius. So, if your sun is in the 11th or in the sign of Aquarius, friendship is key to love. You need freedom and shared ideals. Now remember, Aquarius and Leo work on the same axis. Leo lives in the fifth house, Aquarius is in the 11th house. So regardless, they work opposite each other. Okay, so that's the axis of friendship. So it's very key, but you need freedom. and shared ideals. You can't be with somebody who has a very different worldview as you, which I suppose is probably a good piece of advice anyway. You should be with people who share your worldview, right? But like it really matters to you guys, right? Unconventional partnerships um, appeal to you. So for some of you, that might mean, maybe they're from a different culture or a same-sex relationship or somebody at a distance, or maybe you're like married but living separately, or yeah, anything that would be considered contrary to the societal norm is up your alley. You're more comfortable with it than maybe other people are. Okay. And now moving on, the sun in the 12th house and or Pisces, you love selflessly and spiritually. This is a beautiful day. It is the deepest water. It's a water sign, but it's the bottomless ocean. So, hidden emotions or karmic bonds shape your relationships, right? Boundaries matter, guys. If you are a Pisces sun or your sun is in the 12th house, this might be something that you have to consciously establish the idea of boundaries, because boundaries absolutely do matter, okay? So, that's a quick run through the sun signs. Now let's move on to the moon in relationships, going houses 1 through 12. Now, the moon shows your emotional needs, your attachment style, and your nurturing instincts. So if your moon is in the first house and or Aries, you wear your heart on your sleeve. You crave closeness and emotional transparency. This is very important to you, okay? Emotionally. If your moon is in the second house and or Taurus, you feel safe with material security and loyal affection. You nurture through stability. That's how you feel secure and stable. Also through being recognized and seen, because the second house is very connected to our sense of self and self-esteem, right? So anything that we could get, right, in that space connected to material security or very loyal affection is what's going to really feed you. Now, if your moon is in the third house and or Gemini, you bond through words and shared ideas. Emotional safety, which is very connected to the moon, by the way, comes from staying mentally connected. So you're someone who really needs those open channels of conversation and communication in relationship for you to feel emotionally stable and secure. Now, moving into the fourth house, if your moon is in Cancer and or the fourth house, this is a very deeply, deeply sentimental placement. Home and family define love. You crave emotional safety and roots. And your early experience in your life absolutely defined how it is that you seek love and experience love. Now, for some of you, it may be to spite where you're from, despite where you're from, because of where you're from. You may be honoring it or fighting it off, but there's no question that the way you experience your emotions in relationship is very deeply connected to your first family, very connected to your Chiron, by the way, and we'll get to Chiron in a little bit. Even a little, everybody's impacted by that Chiron in a pretty substantial way, but you guys a little more so, right? So that's just very important to understand, but you crave that emotional safety and roots and feeling grounded. It's very important for you to feel grounded. So if you feel unstable, if you don't feel very grounded in a situation, it's going to feel like your shoes are on the wrong feet in the relationship, or you're trying to fit a circle in a square. So it's worth kind of noting within yourself. Now, moving on to the fifth house and or Leo moon. So if your moon is in the fifth or your Leo is in moon, and if your moon is in Leo or the moon is in the fifth, this is very playful, very romantic, very affectionate. You express emotions creatively and you seek love that feels joyful, that feels happy. You feel very connected to your children. And it's like a deep kind of connection to your children, to children in general, to kids in general, right? Is that emotional moon in the fifth? It's just like it's a very maternal energy as well, obviously, right? Even if you're a man, it doesn't matter. You just feel that energy connection towards, and you feel very deeply when it comes to children, when it comes to your own business, when it comes to monetizable talents, your own hobbies, the desire to take a chance on something, right? Be careful if your moon is in the fifth into a Leo when it comes to gambling, though. That's the only thing, because the moon is very changeable, right? So you can get lucky and then it could change on a dime. So you have to be a little careful of that, but very romantic, very affectionate energy. Now, if your moon is in Virgo or your moon is in the sixth house, you nurture through care and service. So emotional satisfaction comes from daily reliability, acts of help, right? The more you get, so if you have a partner who like remembers to pick you up some tea or coffee while they're on their way over, or if they remember, if they know you're busy and they wash your car, that's just so amazing, right? Especially if you have your moon in Virgo and or the sixth. That's like, I mean, people, everybody would appreciate that. That's just a general beautiful act of kindness. But like for you, that's like, yes, that is definitely a chapter of your love language right there. Now, moving on to the seventh house, if your moon is in the seventh or your moon is in Libra, emotional fulfillment depends on relationship. So you may mirror your partner's moods and need harmony, right? This is very important to understand, right? You're very emotional in relationship because what's opposing the seventh house or the Virgo energy, what opposes that is the first house or Aries energy, right? So what it is that you really want versus what it is that you're getting. And you can feel very sensitive to that, right? Very sensitive to so if your partner is in a bad mood and acting a particular way, you almost can't help but sort of take that on. It's like you're very spongy in that area, right? Um, and then you're going to really want some harmony and peace, right, on the other side of that. Okay, now if your moon is in Scorpio and or the eighth house, emotional intensity, deep bonds, and healing through intimacy absolutely be manifesting here. Trust issues and vulnerability are very central. So it is very difficult for you to trust in a relationship. And I could tell you what, work with a lot of people where the moon's in Scorpio. And, I usually find that there was a lot of vulnerability when it came to mother energy or um, not even necessarily mother, almost like the ancestral patterning of mother energy, of the feminine, that where there is some, when your moon is in the eighth house, there's some sort of like karmic payback situation going on in life as well, having to do particularly with like the mother side of the ancestral patterning. And you may just vibe that, you may just kind of feel that in your relationships. I mean, that's not that big a deal. I mean, it's just a matter of calling it out and saying, okay, I want to end this particular cycle, right? This particular cycle of control, maybe cycle of abuse. Cycle for how money is shared, how intimacy is experienced, right? Wanting to just really level up in that particular area. But there's a lot of healing that could happen here, which is why I'm saying it like that, because the moon can be very, very healing in the eighth house. So being able to heal everything that I just mentioned, right? Now moving into the ninth house. So if your moon is in Sagittarius or the ninth house, and or the ninth house, you need emotional freedom and you need shared beliefs. When I say shared beliefs, like let's think about the ninth house has to do with religion, organized or otherwise, politics, general understanding of the world at large, what your truth is. When you think about growth in life, are you with somebody who shares that same vision? Yeah. It's also very connected to like long distance or culturally different partners. You can certainly attract people who are very different. Now, people can be culturally different, but be on the same wavelength as you when it comes to, for example, religion and politics. Do you know what I'm saying? So one doesn't necessarily like feed into the other one. The moon rules the fourth house as well. And that ninth house, though, has to do with foreign land and foreign travel. So a lot of times when people have their moon in Sagittarius and or the ninth house, there is this moving situation at some point in life, like it's over a body of water, right? So a long distance, like maybe you end up living in a foreign country, foreign land. If you're not ending up, maybe living with somebody from a different culture, you get what I'm saying, though. It's like something very different in that way. Is very common when we have our moon in the ninth house and or Sagittarius. Um, 10th house. So that if your moon is in the 10th house or your moon is in Capricorn, public image and emotional identity connect. So you may nurture or be nurtured through career partnerships, right? And even if you never worked, by the way, because the 10th house is not only like regular career, it's also your very long-term goals. It's also the status of your most important relationships. So with that Saturnian energy, because Saturn rules the 10th house in Capricorn naturally, right? With that, responsibility and stick-to-itiveness and being, this idea of having a firm, stable base. That's something that you really want to look for when you have your moon in that 10th house. So anything that is that you're connecting to, um, having to do with any of those things makes you feel very stable. So a lot of times when people have their moon in the 10th house, they're they're known publicly through something connected with their relationship as well. Um, Also very close to mother energy, by the way, because that moon, the 10th house is the manifestation of mother energy, and with the moon in there, which represents mother and maternal, there might have been some experienced disappointment surrounding mother energy at some point. And I'm not necessarily saying like that she disappointed you, but maybe some sort of illness or some sort of break in relationship because of something else, or could have been her, whatever. That could easily, but like profound enough for you to know what I'm talking about. I mean, everybody gets disappointed by somebody who feels vulnerable at one point or another, right? Um, so, but this is something that is notable, okay? Now, moving on to the 11th house into Aquarius, if your moon is in Aquarius or your moon is in the 11th house, you feel safe in friendships and shared causes. You're detached, but you're loyal, and you need emotional equality. So if you're in a relationship where somebody's trying to strong arm you, or you're in a relationship with somebody who's super, super needy, it's going to feel very off balance to you, right? And the whole thing detached, that's just Aquarius. That's just what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't love. In fact, you're one of the most loyal, that's one of the most loyal placements. You're very loyal. But this idea of detachment is an attempt to maintain emotional autonomy. It's a very autonomous sign, that 11th house really wants its own freedom, right? But you feel safe. You feel safe in relationships. You feel safe in shared causes. But you better have your wiggle room. And that person may not be like, gimme, 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 or trying to totally control you. That'll last for a hot minute. And then you're going to be in real short order. You're going to be like, okay, I can't, so just know that about yourself. Now, going to the 12th house or Pisces. So the moon in Pisces, ooh, it's a very strong placement. Moon in Pisces enter the 12th house, empathetic and sensitive. Oh my goodness. You feel it. You feel it. You feel it. You may sacrifice in love as well, because that's the sign in the house of the nurse of unconditionally loving and giving, but it's also we can even victimize ourselves or be victimized, right, in that space. So you always want to remember, right, if your moon is in Pisces, your moon is in the 12th house, it's not okay to be a doormat, right? It's not okay to be done. So you crave soul connection, but you need to have these firm emotional boundaries. You need to have them for yourself. And that's not the easiest thing because you're so loving and you're so emotional and you just want to be this just big ball of just love and goodness. But not everybody's gonna, give that back to you. right? And you can attract energies that could very easily take a little bit of advantage of that, right? So that idea of boundaries is more about self-preservation and self-respect, and it's not about you being like, my way, the highway. It has to be like this. No, it's different. It's just like, okay, I want to help you, I want to love you, but I also need to be respected. So there's got to be some reciprocity and the like, right? Okay, so that's the moon, all 12 houses. Now let's talk about our rising sign. So the rising sign is probably the most important here. When it comes to relationships, um, it's your path. It's the path that you're walking on, right? Um, this is where we interpret love, conceptually through through the energy of our first house. It really does show us how we approach love and how it ultimately manifests, especially depending on what your chart ruler is. So I'm going to go through, obviously, everyone's rising sign, by the way, is in their first house. I'm sorry, I should have led with that. So the rising sign is always in the first house. The ruler of the sun on your first house is your chart ruler, right? And that's, of course, going to impact how it is that you experience love. So if you are in your first house, if you have Aries energy, you approach relationships assertively and independently. Chemistry matters as much as commitment. You have to vibe it. You have to feel it. There's got to be something. Now, that's very subjective, obviously, right? But um, you also want to be with somebody who you're attracted to. The commitment's got to be there. You don't want to have to worry about them running around with other people. You just don't want to have to worry about that. But keep in mind that that first house Aries energy is like fresh path, new perspective. Let's find experiences. Let's find opportunities. It's like, all right, well, how are we going to do that? I'm not sure, but let's be in this together, right? And you really want to have that let's be in this together kind of energy when you're in relationship. So are you assertive? Yes. Are you independent? Yes, within your own self. Well, you want to know that your partner, first of all, is cute to you, is committed, but will also help you move forward in your life, right? And I don't mean that in necessarily in a materialistic way, but there's got to be agency there, right? And you want somebody who's going to have that agency with you, right? That's something that you would really appreciate in relationship. Now, if Taurus is your rising sign, if Taurus is on your first house, this is an energy of steady, loyal, and grounded love. You build love through trust and through shared values. It's a lovely rising sign, right? When it comes to relationships. Now, Taurus energy also is that really does need to feel the idea of security and does need to feel acknowledged and seen. Because Taurus energy rules the idea of our sense of self and self-esteem, right? And so it's crucial that you're with somebody who sees you, who understands what security is like, because you are all about it. If they can give you that, you are steady, you are loyal, you are grounded, right? And that trust and that shared everything is needs to be there. It's actually a very lovely rising sign when it comes to relationships. Then we have Gemini. So if you are Gemini rising, communicative, curious, flirty in love. You love to flirt. Words are shared, um, and there's bonding. It's through sharing of words where there's bonding. Like that's the aphrodisiac there, right? But communication is really, really important. Now, I will say that, having that Gemini energy on the first would mean that Sagittarius is on the seventh, right, having to do with serious relationship. And what's interesting about this axis when it comes to relationships is that, Gemini is the Gemini would be the twins, right? So it's about, okay, I love you today because it's Monday, but by Wednesday morning, I might not want to be in this. And I could actually give you a very long list of reasons why. And it's like, a lot of it has to do with that that Gemini energy really wanting a partner in crime, wanting somebody to hang out with and be friends with, right, in that partnership. And but you have to be able to, in one way or another, be able to, you crave this anyway. You could certainly have relationships without this, but you crave the ability to put your partner on some sort of pedestal. Now, whether the pedestal is because of how they look or the work that they do or something outstanding about them, their personality, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. And that's very subjective. But you want to be able to do that. The second that wears old, or the second that person, by for whatever reason, falls off that pedestal, you can very quickly be uninterested. It's like the level of disinterest becomes very real, and you have a harder time staying in things. So you have to be able to always have that little bit of excitement there. Because you can flip, and also, meaning flip your feelings, not flip out, but flip your feelings, actually in a pretty calm way. Um, and also at the same time, you do have this natural predisposition to being emotionally scared of intimacy. I guess we could just say that. You want the I love yous, you want the hugs, you want the long talks, the long romantic walks, all of that stuff is fabulous. But if somebody starts getting too close and they could see the little pink, scared, vulnerable version of yourself that's buried deep down, you'd be like, okay, no, 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 no. Yeah, sit over there. It's not comfortable for you at all because there is this fear of intimacy. I could do a whole video just on that, on the fear of intimacy of several of the signs, right? The air signs are really not very comfortable when it comes to that deep, deep kind of intimacy, believe it or not. They don't want anybody getting too close. So if it's flirty, if it's curious, if it's communicative, all of that stuff is kind of surface, sharing words, all that stuff is a little, surface. And you can have that and have a very deeply committed relationship, absolutely. But you have to have the ability to feel like you have some space for yourself, because you have to remember that working opposite you is very expansive, wanderlust Sagittarius, right? So you're always sort of being pulled to this other side, right? So you may, if you sit down, you're really honest with yourself, realize that when it comes to relationships, you have a foot in the room, but you might have the door open a little bit with like half your foot in another room. So that you have this ability to kind of leave. And then it's easier to leave. It's easier to say the grass is greener on the other side, or it's easier to say than that this person had all of these failings and flaws, right? It's easier to leave if we don't give ourselves 100%, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to Cancer rising, so Cancer on the first house, this is a very private, very nurturing, very emotionally rooted energy. Family ties influence your romantic style, right? So, your experiences with your first family, your experience with your own parents, or seeing your parents' relationship. Now it could be because you saw a loving relationship, or you crave a close relationship because you feel like that was a lacking. You just have to watch out with a little codependency in relationships when it comes to that. But this idea, you in relationship, you're very nurturing, you're very emotionally rooted, you're very private. You don't feel the need to, air your dirty laundry to everybody. No, no, no. Now moving on to Leo rising. Very charismatic, very playful. You fall in love easily. You love being adored. And I will tell you that if Leo is on your first, that puts Scorpio in your fourth. And that fourth house is very connected to your early environment. And wherever Scorpio hangs out, there is a lack of stability, generally speaking. So you may reflect on your early environment. Not that there wasn't love, but there wasn't this kind of stability. So it's very common for Leo risings to really crave a different kind of stability on their own terms when they get older and they get into relationships and their own family. And it'll be very difficult for you to tolerate someone who does not want to join on that journey with you, right? But that being said, it's such a lovely, fun, loving rising sign. And then we have Virgo rising. So, Virgo on the first, you are helpful, you are patient, you are practical. You show your love through consistent service and care, right? You're there for people, you problem solve for people, you're a problem solver by nature. You might worry a bit, you might experience situations with like open enemies in your life, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you are naturally this helpful, patient, practical energy that people can really rely on. And then we have Libra rising. So, Libra rising, very partnership oriented. You define yourself through we. And again, relationships are your mirror. So, whatever relationship you're in, it's mirroring back to you your life. It's mirroring back. So, if you're in a relationship that you're really unhappy in, or if you're in a relationship with somebody who's getting in trouble, that can make you feel bad about yourself. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's very loving and giving, even if they don't have a lot, but they dote on you, that's like so nurturing for your soul. Right. So it's that mirroring effect that certainly happens that you have to understand. So you have to be super careful when you're in a relationship, because if you're with someone who's not nurturing you in this way, it can make you feel very, very depleted, very depressed, kind of anxious. So just be mindful of that. Okay. Now moving on to Scorpio rising, very magnetic, very deep, very transformative in relationships. You tend to attract soul level partnerships that push your growth, right? That push you to grow in one way or another. It could be through crappy experiences, it could be through amazing experiences, or maybe it's peppered different ways, but you are growing and you are learning through your relationships. Now, does depend on where your Venus is. Again, none of this is in isolation, but that energy, it's very magnetic. There's nothing light and airy about it. Very transformative. You're very honest as well when it comes to your relationships, and you're very like, you want to do stuff on your own terms. You have your ideas of about how things are supposed to be in Scorpio world, right? I mean, because it's very subjective, right? But at least you're in touch with what you feel like is the right thing. It's very difficult for you to be with an energy who's not like that. Now, keep in mind, if you're Scorpio rising, that means you have Pisces on the fifth, which is falling in love, love affairs, romance, and you can end up being, taken advantage of in relationship. You can end up um, self-sabotaging in the area of relationship. So you want to be mindful of that, because you are magnetic, and you do change and transform as a result. But just you want to keep in mind that you do have that Pisces on the fifth as well. Now, Sagittarius rising, adventurous, very philosophical, very inspired by difference, right? All about like being able to identify the difference in things. Difference is a very interesting concept for Sagittarius rising, because you can be very attracted to people who are just like you, but when dealing with people who are very, very different, you have a keen eye in being able to evaluate exactly how it is that they're different. You don't mind it. If they're expanding your mind, as long as they accept you. But you're very sensitive to people who are going to be very judgy. Somebody's going to be very, so you're somebody who you could be friends with everybody. If they're going to, all walks of life, you're good with it. People from different cultures, anything that's going to, again, expand you. But if these people, through the energy of expansion, are being very judgy towards you, or you feel like that in any way, is very hard for you to feel comfortable, more than anyone else, being in any kind of uh, close relationship of any kind with somebody like that. But if they're just there with their own ideas and their own sensibilities, and they just want to share it with you and be friends with you anyway, all about it, right? And so that's a great quality to have in relationship, because you're able to see many sides of something. You have no desire to completely own anyone's sense of self, right? You encourage, the idea of of own opinions and doing own things and all of that, right? Because you appreciate that. Now, moving on to Capricorn, Capricorn risings, very responsible, very achievement oriented. You likely seek partners who respect ambition and reputation. I'm a Capricorn rising. I can tell you, yeah. I mean, for me, yep. Like I work a lot, right? I mean, most of you know that. I'm always working, you know. This is just, you know, part of what I do, and I'm a college professor, and I do different things. I help prep kids to get them ready for college. I do all kinds of things, right? I do private readings. I'm very busy with my private readings. If my husband didn't like give me the space that I need for that, or if he were to complain about it, that would be a major problem for me. So, you know, and it's not that I'm close to it, it's just like this is who I am. This is what I like, you know, what I like to do until I don't like doing it anymore. But for now, this is what I like to do. So anything like that, right? Because this is, you know, when it comes to relationships, Capricorn risings tend to be very, you know, responsible. And as far as the achievement oriented, it's yeah, I mean, like we like to know where are we going, what are we doing in relationship, you know, to have that end goal. Everything's about end goals, right? When you have a heavy Capricorn placement, right, in general. Now, if you're an Aquarius rising, you're very friendly, you're very progressive, you're very idealistic, you might be really into technology, but there is certainly something very out of the box and very not like everybody else having to do with you. You know, you love people who share your vision, you love that, but there is something a little out of the box, and you don't want to be made to feel bad about that, right? You are you. Right? Those of you Aquarius risings know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to tell you, I have twin boys who are 25 years old, and they're Cancer suns, but they are Aquarius risings. I will tell you, my one son loves classical music, is so not into social media. He's like very serious into tech, like that's what his grad degree is in. And he has a very unusual um, take on employment. And my other son is very into his faith, and he is, everybody always calls him an old soul. He loves antiques. He loves to, you know, dress his own way. That's so Aquarius, right? And it's and they have people in their life though who like love that about them and actually consider that a good thing. And so you need to be with somebody who sees those differences and really respects and honors them, right? Because that's something that you really you'll give that back to them as well, right? Um, but you are idealistic in relationship, and that's something that you do want to be mindful of, right? That might be something that from time to time you do have to get in front of, that idealism. And then if you are a Pisces rising, oh, you're so empathetic and you're so mysterious because Pisces rules the 12th house of mystery. You love spirituality. Very intuitive. Soul bonds can feel very, very faded. You feel very, you know, have that kind of soul connection and that soul contract and feel it really, really quite deeply. It's a very, very loving, nurturing rising sign when it comes to relationships. Now, keep in mind though, Pisces can also be, remember, Pisces is the twin fish. Now, Gemini's the twin, Pisces is a twin too. It's a twin fish going in opposite directions. Unconditionally loving and giving, but it can also be very self-sabotaging and very victimized. So, you know, that's where the boundaries and the balance need to come in. Okay. You have to be very mindful of that in relationship. So I hope that was helpful. Now let's move on to discussing Venus in relationships, houses 1 through 12. So now Venus governs your love language, attraction, and affection. So if your Venus is in Aries or the first house, we're talking about magnetic charm. You attract very easily, right? You exude warmth, you love self-expression, you love harmony, right? You love all of that beautiful stuff. Venus in the second house and or Taurus energy, loyal, sensual, you value stability, and very tangible affection. So you're somebody who your love language is stability. Your love language is our material possessions. It's just that's what the second house is. Affirmations, feeling very affirmed by somebody in your relationship. That's all that Venus in the second house and or Taurus. Now, if Venus is in the third house and or Gemini, this is very communicative, very flirty, very witty. Words are your love tool. Real nice energy there when it comes to communicating, but that's your love language. You need it back. You need it back. You want somebody who's able to be that to you, right? Venus in the third house, by the way, can also indicate a real connection to siblings, extended family, neighbors, old friends, when it comes to just general relationships as well, but very flirty, very communicative, and very witty. And that's what you like in a partner. Now, in the fourth house, and or Cancer. So Venus is in Cancer or the fourth house. Family and home life are core to love. Domestic harmony equals emotional safety. And that's what you look for. Venus in the fourth house, you need emotional stability, emotional safety. You want to have a peaceful home environment. You need to have a beautiful home environment as well, because Venus loves beauty. So you likely, even on a shoestring budget, you can make things look super cute around the house, right? But you need that harmony. You want that harmony. You want that balance, right? Because remember, Venus rules both Taurus as well as Libra, right? So it wants this stability and this balance and this transparency, right? It's very needed. And in that fourth house, that's what's needed to feel emotionally secure in relationship. Now, if your Venus is in the fifth house and or Leo, very romantic, very passionate, very expressive. Remember, fifth house is the house of falling in love, love affairs, romance. So you love joyfully, you love theatrically. What I mean by that is large expressions of love. So if your Venus is in the fifth house, you know, yes, a 3 carat diamond, please, thank you very much. Or can we get the biggest house on the block? It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just you appreciate the biggest and the best, right? You appreciate all of that. If someone, plans like this big fancy date, this like the big thoughtful date, like that just matters so deep, so much to you, right? The romance must stay alive. I will tell you, if Venus is in your fifth house and or Leo, first of all, you love your kids. Love your kids. Okay, great. This is not about children, though. Just want to add that in because it's nice to add. But that fifth house energy, there's got to be date night. Like if you've been married for a long time, you cannot forget you have to keep dating your partner. It's so important for you to feel connected, right? So important. So if Venus is in Leo or Venus is in the fifth house, at least once a week, you got to go on a really nice date, right? Just and maintain that romance, that passion. Super key. If you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult to stay as engaged, right? As maybe you would ideally like. Now, if Venus is in your sixth house and or Virgo, you show love through service, dependability, and you care for details. You will care for the details of the day to day. So you are somebody who, remembers the little things, around the house that could maybe even be perceived as the invisible work around the house. But with that Venus energy, it's like you're happy to do it. You're happy to do it. You have no problem doing it. As long as, because your love language here is also service back to you, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Your love language is service, to get and receive, dependability, get and receive, care for details, get and receive, right? So it's a nice energy. It's only a little tricky if you're with somebody who's not as thoughtful as you, right? So this would be something that you would want to communicate, right? That you need a relationship. Now, if you have Venus in the seventh house and or Libra, partnership is essential. Venus is very exalted here because she rules the seventh house. She rules Libra, right? You seek balance, you seek cooperation. Relationships are just so terribly important to you. So when I say it's essential, it's like you could not be in relationship and focus on work and your friends, but you definitely feel that vacancy. Doesn't mean that you're codependent, just means that you have your Venus in either Libra or the seventh. Okay. So when it comes to being able to move forward in your life, right, in a way that really speaks to your heart space, a relationship is involved in that. And if it's not, again, you could do other things to try to fill that vacancy, but it's something that you're very aware of. Whereas, like, for example, like Venus and Aquarius would not feel that way to that degree, right? So there were some placements or some houses that we could have our Venus in that where we don't have, such the need. Right. Now, if Venus is in Scorpio and or the eighth house, this is intense passion. You crave emotional fusion, sexual depth, that real connection. Venus in the eighth house can also indicate gaining resources through a partner, right? Whether it's through their money. Eighth house is the house of inheritance. It could be that. But there can be some like financial benefit through relationship, right, in that space. Now, if Venus is in the ninth house and or Sagittarius, you love adventure, you love diversity and growth in love, right? Growing and becoming more than who you originally were as a couple, right, is very important. Long distance or cross-cultural bonds can certainly appeal to you. Anything like that. Um, Trying to think of any Venus when it comes to relationship. You can, for those of you who are male and your Venus is in the ninth or Sagittarius, your father energy could certainly, well, this is for guys and girls, but if you're a man in a heterosexual relationship, the way you do relationship can be very reflective of your father. So where you act like your father in relationship, if it was a way that you really admired, or you can act contrary to the way that your father was in relationship. But the father energy certainly plays a role. If you're a female, heterosexual female, and um, you have your Venus in the ninth house and or Sagittarius, you can look for a father type of energy in your relationship. And obviously, I don't mean like you're looking for a daddy. I don't mean like that kind of thing, but qualities of your father, or perhaps even like qualities maybe that you miss about your father or that you felt like your father never even possessed. You can easily look for those in a male, right? In a male partner there. That's just the dynamic, right, of how it can end up playing out in that space. Now, if your Venus is in the 10th house and or Capricorn, you tend to attract influential partners. Love and career often intertwine. I see this all the time with my clients. It's very, very interesting how this happens. So now it could be a couple of things. So this love and career often intertwining, maybe no career, love and the status, how you're known in life, love and being able to attain and achieve your long-term goals, right, that you've really wanted. But there is this energy of other, right, in that space. Also, if you have Venus in the 10th house, chances are you had a very strong bond with mother energy as well. Now, going to the 11th house or Aquarius, so Venus in the 11th and or Aquarius, very friendly, freedom-loving, experimental. You thrive in equal, future-minded love. Like, let's sit down and talk about this together. You're going to contribute this. I'm going to contribute this. That's how we're going to manifest our 11th house goals and gains. Let's sit down and talk about the next 10 years. Let's figure it out. But at the same time, super friendly, you experimenting, no problem. Let's try different things, but you have to have your freedom. And when I say freedom, you don't want to have to worry about being with someone that you have to worry about them being faithful, and generally speaking, Venus and Aquarius is not looking to go dog around. This is not at all what it is. It's just that you have your own unique way of living life, and you are more than happy to share your energy with somebody else as long as you're able to maintain and preserve that individual part of you That's how you're happy in relationship. But if somebody is coming in and they're suffocating you to the point where you don't feel like you have that ability, it becomes really, really difficult to stay satisfied in that kind of situation. So it's more like, remember, 11th house is the house of friendship, right? That's the axis of friendship, right? 11th house, fifth house, right? So the whole friendship thing and having a lot in common, but giving each other space, that's the ideal, right? That's the ideal. Anything out of the box and different, you're all about it, right? Why not? And then we have oh, by the way, 11th house Venus. These days, you might bond through gaming, or you may bond through technology, or you may meet your partner online, right? Because that 11th house is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus rules technology, right? And then we have the 12th house, or Pisces. So if your Venus is in Pisces, or your Venus is in the 12th house, secretive and spiritual love. You love unconditionally, but you must watch for self-sacrifice. You have to. Okay, in that 12th house, because it's the house of self-sacrifice. It's very unconditionally loving, very beautiful. Like you just want to give, give, give. It's like that's just who you are. But boundaries, super important here. Now, I do want to just make a note at this point. Venus retrograde. If you have Venus retrograde, generally speaking, regardless of the house that we're in, okay, Venus retrograde can have you going for relationships that are either out of your league or they're not attainable, or they're with people who are maybe already taken, maybe they're married already, they're in a different relationship. There could be secretness around money as well. There could be the your imagination can be very, very active when it comes to what it is that you really crave and like when it comes to intimacy. And you may not even really feel comfortable sharing that with a person. It takes you a very long time to get over broken relationships, exceptionally long when your Venus is retrograde. Venus retrograde is very unusual. It's only 8% of the population has it. And when I say unusual, like Mercury retrograde, 54% of the population have that. So it's a lot more common. Only 8% have Venus retrograde. So it's worth noting if you do have it retrograde that the kind of love that you're looking for can elude you, or when you're in a relationship, you may have a really hard time. You could be in a relationship for years and years and years and have a really difficult time being authentically who you are for fear of not being accepted and loved for who it is that you actually are. And again, there could be, secretive around about money or about, even things within your family, right? Very connected to family as well. So, I just want to acknowledge that because I'm sure people will be like, wait, I have my Venus retrograde. What does this mean? I think I did a whole video on her. You can actually check. I think I did a video on Venus retrograde or on Venus, and then I did the retrograde. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. If I didn't, maybe I'll do one. But anyway, let's move on to Mars. So Mars in relationships, houses 1 through 12, Mars governs sexual energy and our drive and our assertiveness in partnership. So if you have your Mars in the first house and or Aries, first of all, very exalted because he's the ruler of the first house and the ruler of Aries, modern ruler of Aries, original ruler of Scorpio, but we don't really consider Mars the ruler of Scorpio anymore. I know, a lot of you hate when I say that. You disagree with me greatly. I'm so sorry, but not since 1930. It's middle of 1930, right? Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. But anyway, we'll just throw him in for good measure. But let's talk about the first house. So Mars in the first, or Mars in Aries, very passionate and direct, right? When it comes to your sexual energy, your drive, and that assertiveness and partnership. Passionate, direct, you pursue what you want very boldly in love. No one's going to be guessing what it is that you want. Okay. You're going to be very kind of forward, forward speaking about it. Now, let me just give you a little caveat. If by chance in your birth chart you happen to have Saturn retrograde in the first house and you have your Mars in there, Saturn retrograde makes you very hesitant to express yourself. You're gonna have like this natural guilt. So you're not going to manifest the experience of Mars in the first, right, in the same way. I'm just saying that as you have to know your own chart, right? These general messages can be a little tricky in that way, but generally speaking, Mars in Aries or Mars in the first house, very passionate, very direct, and very bold. Now, if you have your Mars in the second house into a Taurus, your sexual energy is very sensual, very loyal. Sexual fulfillment is very tied to stability and self-worth. Okay. So it's very difficult to unknot the two. So how could you see this going on here? Well, you know, that energy, that sexual energy can be used to in a way, and this sounds manipulative, but it's really not because it's kind of based in fear. Um, that sexual energy can be used and called out to help you feel more stable and secure in life when it comes to material possessions as well as finances, right? So there is this connection between the two. Okay. Now, Mars in the third and or Gemini, verbal foreplay or playful teasing, all about that, okay? You act on curiosity, you act on mental connection when it comes to um, communicative connection within relationship. Absolutely. Now, in the fourth house and or Cancer, very protective and emotionally invested when it comes to your relationships. Anger and passion both run deep, and they are like different sides of the same coin, right? Something you have to understand is you have that, if you have that Mars energy in the fourth, there's a lot of deep energy. Because remember, Aries is fire. Aries, Mars rules Aries, right? The fiery energy, that energy of war, the warrior, right? Um, it runs deep. The third and fourth house are very interesting to me when it comes to it, right? Because Mars is the warrior of war, and in the third house, his weapon are words, right? And in the fourth house, the weapon is are emotions, right? So you're very protective and you're very emotionally vested, right? But your emotions, right, can be this weapon that ends up coming out, right? There can be anger exhibited or very deep passion at the same time. So it does depend on, what else is going on, right, in that space with that Mars in the fourth. But it's not boring. I'll tell you that. Mars in the fourth is not boring. Now, Mars in the fifth and or Leo, very fiery, creative. By the way, going back to it's Mars in the fourth and or Cancer, okay? So I know I'm throwing around a lot of different signs. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Mars in the fifth, Mars in Leo. Mars in the fifth or Mars in Leo. Fiery, creative, so romantic. Very dramatic, again, theatrical kind of love. And this is what you pursue. You want that fiery, passionate energy. When you have Mars in the fifth, your toes have to be curling a little bit. You know what I'm saying? You have to have the romance going on a little bit. You have to have a good time. You have to do all of that, right? I'm not saying every day, but enough for you to feel like you're getting your fill. Now, if you have Mars in the sixth house and or Virgo, you serve and support your partners actively. Sexual energy channels through work or routine. I mean, that's just what it is. And that'll get you going too. So if somebody's doing a lot for you, a lot of favors, a lot of like if somebody came in and cleaned up your house and, you know, did a bunch of favors for you without even asking, and that's just going to be great. But at the same time, Mars in relationships in that sixth house, if somebody's never taken the garbage out, if they don't know where the dishwasher is in your house, if they have no idea what the hell a washing machine is, or they have no idea how to do anything, oh, that Mars is going to come out with a different face in that sixth house because that also is where Virgo lives, which is very critical. So you'd be very critical in how it is that you exercise that passionate energy. You're there all day, every day for the person. But if you're not getting it back at all, because again, you're happy to give it, but you want to be able to it's your love language back too, right? So you need that as well, right? And with that Mars energy in the sixth, like you really like doing like chores with your partner. You like connecting with them on the day to day, running errands and doing those things. Those were actual like really sweet moments that you would really appreciate that a lot of other placements would not. Now, if you have Mars in the seventh house and or Libra, strong desire for partnership, right? Definitely. You may create conflict or competition in relationship. Balance is absolutely the key because remember, it's Mars and Mars in that seventh house and or Libra, it's opposing that Aries ruled, Mars ruled first house. So they're sitting in opposition. So it's like Mars opposing Mars, you know, so that's just something worth noting, right? The desire is very strong, though, to be in a very healthy, balanced relationship. But if it's not there, you can absolutely get the dust ruffled up here for there to be conflict, or even there could even be one-upmanship. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, well, I always do A, B, and C, and you never do. Or I am always the only one to do blah, blah, blah and you never do blah blah blah, right? Those kinds of things because you're it's not that you're looking to be difficult, you're striving for balance. That's all it is. And if you're always doing, obviously the scales are going to be like this. You're like, well, I do, and you're not doing anything. Can you just balance the scales out? I'm not asking for a lot. If this is your placement, chances are you've had conversations very similar to this in your relationship. Now, Mars in the eighth house into Scorpio, very intense sexual magnetism. Remember, the eighth house is where sex lives, and Mars does not play around. As the original ruler of the eighth house, you seek merging, you seek that psychological intimacy, deep, 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 intense. No surface stuff will do, right? You really want that deep, intense attraction. Um, and when you do have that, intimacy, um, it's probably a lot of fun with Mars in the eighth house. Okay. Now, Mars in the ninth house into Sagittarius, you're drawn to exciting, adventurous partners. Your passions are tied to beliefs. And in the ninth house, so that area of bonding could be religion, organized or otherwise, your politics, um, your general view of the world. Your bonding could be travel. Your bonding could be anything that's going to expand your mind. There are so many ways to bond with Mars in the ninth house, right? Um, there could have been some tricky energies between you and your dad, but let's keep this about relationship. Now, moving on to the 10th house. So Mars in the 10th or Mars in Capricorn, very, very ambitious. You are attracted to capable, visible people, partners. Okay. When I say visible, I mean like they have some sort of name for themselves within whatever it is that they're doing. This is what you're attracted to. You're attracted to somebody who's capable, who's recognized, who's ambitious, who's respected out there in the world. Now you may mix career and passion too. So meeting somebody at work, or maybe you work with a partner, or you're very active in maybe being supportive of your partner in some way or another. Now, if your Mars is in the 11th house and or Aquarius energy, you pursue friendship turned romance. This is another one that I see a lot. Mars in the 11th and or Aquarius. Oh, I was friends with this person for years and years, and suddenly one night I just saw them differently. All right. I mean, this is like, yeah, for sure. Shared ideals spark attraction. Oh, we have this in common. We have that in common. And everything just sort of feels a little more different in that way as well. Even if it's in the 11th house, even in like the 11th house, fifth house axis, or like Aquarius Leo axis, that could certainly be happening where, again, it's friendship turned romance. I mean, this is 100%. My husband and I, we were friends when we were young kids in the same neighborhood. And then we grew up always still connected, but he married somebody, I married somebody, then we got divorced, and then just like talking one day and like, hello. And then we were married a year later. It was very weird after years and decades actually of having been friendly from our old neighborhood. So yeah, I mean, it happens a lot in that space. 12th house and or Pisces. Um, if you have your Mars in Pisces or the 12th house, hidden passions, um, sexual or emotional longing often becomes spiritualized. Um, you have like a needs conscious kind of expression. So when it comes to Mars in the 12th, there's a lot of fire, a lot of emotion when it comes to your subconscious, when it comes to your need to express yourself, right? It's hidden, but it's there, right? So a really good relationship for you is one where you feel very safe to be very passionate, to be very spiritual, to have that deep soul connection. So if you're into that kind of stuff, but you're connected with somebody who doesn't really believe in spirituality, they're very stiff, rather austere in that particular area. Maybe they're kind of like stilted in their spiritual affect, that's not going to be somebody that you're going to jive with very well, okay? Because you are with that Mars in there. You're not playing around with your spirituality. So they have to be there on that same page with you. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so with that, let's move on to Juno. Juno in relationships, houses 1 through 12. Juno shows your marriage and commitment patterns, what you need for long-term unions. So if you have your Juno in the first house and or Aries, you seek equality and independence within marriage. You need a partner who respects your individuality. If your Juno is in the second house and or Taurus, commitment grows from loyalty, security, and shared resources, right? This is what you need for a long-term union, right? Comfortably. Juno in the third and or Gemini, communication and intellectual respect are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. You need it. You need the communication. You have to have that connection. If your Juno is in the fourth house and or Cancer, marriage is rooted in emotional safety and home life. So if you're with someone where you do not feel emotionally safe in your home, you don't have the stability of like home, property, real estate, whatever it is, right? That manifests in however that emotional security manifests for you. It's going to be very difficult, right, for you to stay very committed for a long-term union. Now, if your Juno is in the fifth house and or Leo, you marry for love, you marry for creativity, you marry for joy, but you need the passion to last, right? So again, that's another placement. You cannot forget date night. If your Juno is in the fifth house and or Leo, you have to have foreplay, a lot of foreplay when it comes to intimacy. You have to be very good friends with your partner, right? Absolutely required. When it comes to Juno in the sixth house and or Virgo, partnership thrives on teamwork. There could be a real connection when it comes to health and mutual service. So you can share like work that the way you guys work out or the way that you eat healthily, or maybe not. You're right, could be also the opposite of that. You want to be careful of that because with Juno in there, it's just a matter of time before you have to start living a little healthier there. But that's what you thrive on in relationship, right? With Juno in the sixth is that partnership and being of service and health. Now, if your Juno is in the seventh house and or Libra, this is like the archetype, the archetype here of marriage. This is that marriage placement. Partnership defines your destiny. It 100%, like a little stronger than any other placement, right? Relationship absolutely defines your destiny. So really think very long and hard when you're getting in, and also notice what other placements you potentially have, not potentially have, you have in that seventh house as well. But generally speaking, Juno in the seventh, it's committed to marriage, committed to serious partnership, right? And being in that space. Now, if you have Juno in the eighth house or Scorpio, this is a very deep soul union. transformation through intimacy and trust. And you could find this grow deeper and more profound the older you get. As you shed off the reasons that you come, and you will come to realize it with Juno in the eighth, that there are really good reasons not to trust many people, but then there are so many good reasons to trust a really good person, right? And if you get to be fortunate enough to be with a person who you can completely trust, it'll be difficult for you, but you will shed the skin and be able to get down into a very open, beautiful, healing kind of trust with Juno in the eighth. With Juno in the ninth, into Sagittarius, shared beliefs, spiritual growth, or again, cross-cultural bonds characterize that kind of commitment. Okay. So there's something very, again, if it's not with somebody from a different culture or anything like those shared beliefs that I keep mentioning with the ninth house, right? It's your worldview, it's your politics, it's your religion, it's all of those things, right? But having that, you want to be able to share these things with Juno in the ninth. It's very important for you to be able to share those things. Now, if you have Juno in the 10th or you have Juno in Capricorn, marriage impacts your career and your reputation, and you could tend to attract powerful partners as well. Okay. Juno in the 11th and or Aquarius, friendship and shared ideals sustain lasting unions. That's a non-negotiable. Having Juno in the 11th. Beautiful energy. You want your independence. You need that friendship. You want to be in it 100%, but you need your breathing room. And you really appreciate having shared ideals, for sure. Now, if Juno is in the 12th house into a Pisces, karmic or spiritual partnerships are going to be happening here. Unconscious patterns influence the relationship. I mean, unconscious, because when we're talking about the 12th house, we're talking about when you were in utero, before you were even born. We're talking about ancestral patterning that you're bringing into this life. So these could be things, deeply ingrained in you from a past life or from, early in your life, not only you, but your partner. You could be very sensitive both to your own unconscious patterns, but also to other people's as well. And because you're very intuitive, relationships could feel very, very karmic, right? You just want to be careful when you have your Juno in the 12th end of Pisces. You want to be careful that you're not holding on for too tight and too long onto a relationship that we have these things in the spiritual community, the twin flame situation. And I'm so sorry, guys, I don't believe in any of that. This is just my own opinion. We could all be very different with that. But I get a little sensitive to that, I think, because I'm doing this well over 30 years at this point, and I've worked with so many people who use the idea of being in a twin flame relationship as the reason to not let a toxic relationship go. And at the end of the day, it's probably a soulmate energy, which is meant to be in our life for a reason, a season, but not always a lifetime, right? And I always say we really want in life, when it comes to relationship, more of a red thread energy. And I've spoken about this on my channel before. I even think I did a video a couple of years ago about it, where the thinking is when we're born energetically, we have a red ribbon put around, a red string put around one of our ankles, and the other side of the string is put around our, idealized or ultimate life partner's ankle. And it's our energetic intention to try to find that person in this lifetime, right? And that to me is the closest that we're going to get. And what happens there, they're like a soulmate, except we end up figuring things out, right? And staying with that person, right? And it could be really difficult relationships, but we end up being really happy that we stayed, right? And that's kind of, so it's worth noting there, right? Having to do with that, that particular Juno energy in the 12th and or Pisces, right? Because that's just a little caveat with that one. Let me move on to Eros. So Eros in relationships, not too many people know about Eros, but Eros represents passion and a very erotic magnetism and creative desire. So definitely influences our relationships to a certain degree. So if you have Eros in Aries or the first house, this is very connected to sensual and energy and being very self-expressive, very magnetic to others. So if you have Eros in the first, you're very magnetic to others, you're very self-expressive, very sensual. Okay. If you have Eros in the first house and or Aries, if you have, remember, Aries is fire, so it's a very nice energy. If you have Eros in the second and or Taurus energy, this is very tactile. So Eros satisfaction here is very tied to touch, safety, security, loyalty, um, being made to feel secure. Very like that's a very your passion gets going. If you have your Eros and Taurus or your Eros in the second, if somebody is helping you to feel very secure and stable, that's a real like turn on, right, for you. Eros in the third and or Gemini, very turned on by words, ideas, mental stimulation. Obviously, that is where Gemini lives, right? So that would be Eros in Gemini, Eros in the third. Now, Eros in the fourth house and or Cancer energy, erotic charge and emotional safety and nostalgia, right? So when you have the Eros in the fourth house and you are in a relationship that ended, and then that person tries to get back to you, they are going to be activating your Eros from here to high heaven. So you have to just be mindful of that. You can very easily get caught up in the nostalgia of things and have that be a motivating factor why you want to maybe give a relationship another shot or not even get out of a relationship in the first place. Your relationship to the idea of nostalgia is very, very powerful. So it's just worth noting. It's actually quite beautiful unless you're feeling nostalgic for something that's toxic, right? So it just depends on your own experience. Now, Eros in the fifth and or Leo is very playful and very romantic and very dramatic. And what's funny about Eros is very artistic, right? So it's like sexual expression becomes an art form. It almost becomes performative. Whatever. I mean, if you're having a good time with it, go for it, right? I mean, you could still have that and the deep, beautiful soul connection, right? But I'm just saying, like, that could be very performative. So do with that interpretation what you want, okay? But very theatrical, very art form. Is very Eros in the fifth and or Leo. Now, Eros in the sixth and or Virgo, attraction emerges in daily life or shared service. So very subtle but consistent passion. It's like this subtle glance across the vegetable aisle kind of thing, or if your partner is just helping you out with something basic. Eros in this placement can be like, oh my gosh, I know we're just like frying chicken, but man, do I love this person. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's a beautiful position to have. That's beautiful. It could just be a little frustrating if the person that you're with doesn't appreciate that quality in you, I guess I could say. That's where it could be a little tricky, but you feeling that is actually a lovely placement. Now, Eros in the seventh house and or Libra desires really wake up in partnership with Eros in the seventh. This is where love and lust unite, the two of them. So Eros in the seventh, it's like the love and the lust have to be very connected. So for example, if you have Eros in the seventh and you're in a relationship with somebody that you love, but the intimacy has really fallen off, that is really going to be very disturbing to you. Even if you're trying to talk yourself out of it, trying to make it seem to yourself like it doesn't matter, because having Eros in that space, the two of them are very connected, they're very combined, and so not having intimacy for a while can absolutely make you feel very distant from your partner. So even if you don't feel like it, doing that, saying, keeping it real, just being able to engage in the connection will be very good for your relationship. Having it be more of like a point of connection than anything. Do you know what I'm saying? So hopefully that makes sense to you. Eros in the eighth house, indoor Scorpio. This is a very deep sexual, intense kind of energy, very transformative passion. This is a deep one, guys, right? Definitely is. It's deep. And it's something that you really crave, right? You crave that depth with the Eros there. You crave it. You attract it. But do you get your needs met? I don't know. If you do, you're in a great space there because that's a really beautiful positioning for Eros to be. Now, Eros in the ninth house or Eros in Sagittarius, very adventurous sexuality, right? Erotic growth through experience. So if you're like going to different museums or maybe you're taking some sort of like cooking class with your partner or you're able to practice your faith together or you take part in some sort of like political situation together, those are real turn-ons, because doing these adventures together is something that makes you feel very bonded in the relationship. Now, if you have Eros in the 10th and or Capricorn, public magnetism, oof, that's what does it to you, right? Sexuality is linked to success or visibility. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, Jackie, isn't that like everybody? And the honest truth is no. Maybe in theory, a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, if somebody's successful, that's the greatest aphrodisiac. I'm like, okay, your Eros is probably in Capricorn, if not the 10th house, then, right? These are people who feel very connected to that kind of energy. Right. And I do want to say that it's 10th house. 10th house is ruled by Saturn. Saturn's dad is Chronos. It's very connected to the idea of age and time. So if you have your Eros in the 10th house, you might even be attracted to older people who are very successful, who are very like, known out in the world. It's very, very common. I see that all the time. And it's because you have your Eros there, either in Capricorn or in the 10th house. Now, if you have your Eros in the 11th house or Aquarius, you have very unconventional desires, attraction through shared ideals, attraction through friendship. So a lot of times when people have Eros in the 11th house, these are people who um, you know, can be intimate with friends. A lot of people can do that. Or their friends become, more than that. Or there's like some sort of shared, just like life or ideal. Um, Eros in the 11th house can also bring unconventional desires when it comes to intimacy. So maybe, unconventional. I mean, is it even unconventional anymore these days? I feel like it's not, but whatever. Like if you have same-sex attraction or um, if you're bisexual, anything like that, or um, anything like just anything that's just like unconventional. Like these days, right? What's actually unconventional? Because like anything goes now, but you know what I mean. Unconventional, I guess, within the realm of whatever, however you grew up, right? Whatever it is, right? Because it's a very subjective thing. Now, if you have Eros in the 12th house and or Pisces, um, hmm, this is very hidden, deep, deep psychic bonds. This could be almost like very mystical type of sexuality. There's a transcendence to it, but there's also secret. So this is another one I see a lot. Eros in Pisces and or the 12th. Lots of people are involved in secret love affairs who have this particular placement. Um, and the tricky thing is, this is an energy that's attracted. So a lot of times, like I'll work with people in the Dial of Aries, Eros in the 12, and I'll mention this, and then no, 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 I've never been in anything like that. And I'm like, yeah, but do you attract people like that? It's like, oh yes, I do. Like you seem to attract everybody who's like taken or not, just not emotionally available, right? Something to that effect. So, I mean, the good of this is intimacy can be so beautiful because it can be the kind of thing where like you're just communicating without even speaking. I know that sounds kind of crazy if you don't have that experience, but the deep psychic bond is very real with this placement, very real. But You just want to be careful of how the secrets can play out here. Okay. Now let's just talk about Psyche and relationship. We just have a couple more. Psyche, and I want to talk about Vesta, and I want to talk about Chiron, talk about the nodes. But Psyche and relationship, Psyche symbolizes the soul capacity to connect and to understand and to be vulnerable. So if you have Psyche in Aries or the first, you radiate sensitivity. Your soul's beauty draws other people in, right? It's just a very deep energy, right? Second house or Taurus, Psyche on the second or Taurus. You build soulful love through security and shared values. Very beautiful placement. If you have Psyche in the third and or Gemini, you connect, so your souls connect in relationship through words and understanding. Psyche in the fourth and or Cancer energy, that soul love is rooted in emotional safety as well as shared memories, right? It's all about that. Psyche in relationships in the fifth house and or Leo, love feels creative and really childlike. Your soul thrives in play. Psyche in the sixth house and or Virgo energy, that soul growth really happens through helping, healing, and devotion, right? Psyche in the seventh house and or Libra energy, you meet your soul mirror in partnership. If you have Psyche in the seventh, yes, relationship shapes identity 100%. And all these partnership energies in the seventh, that's the deal with that. But that soul mirror really does happen with Psyche in the seventh. So you are meeting a person with circumstances going on in their energy that either are parts of you that need to be healed, that person is going to bring up in you that need to be healed, or they're meant to mirror you in affirmations as well. So it does depend on your situation. Um, Psyche in the eighth house under Scorpio, profound karmic love. You transform through merging. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, if you have Psyche in the ninth house under Sagittarius, the soulmates arrive through spiritual or educational paths, sometimes both. They could be combined. You could also meet your soulmate through some sort of like political connection. You know, you meet your soulmate in school, anything like that, right? Now, Psyche in the 10th house or Capricorn, soul love connected to destiny and purpose. Absolutely. Feels very, very destiny driven, very, very karmic. Absolutely. So psychic in the 11th, on the 11th house, or Aquarius. You connect soulfully through shared ideals, shared causes, and through friendship. When Psyche's in Aquarius or the 11th house, there is a very deep friendship when you're in relationship, which is quite nice. And you can sense it when you don't have that, right? And if you ever have it, it doesn't even matter what the person looked like or whatever else was going on. If you felt that connection, it's very hard to not desire that version, maybe in a different way again. Psychic in the 12th house, Psyche in the 12th house, and or Pisces, karmic soulmates, often from past lives, healing through compassion. Definitely lessons being learned from each other without question, having the Psyche in the 12th and or Pisces. Now let's just talk about Vesta in relationships, because Vesta symbolizes devotion, sacred focus, and Vesta does show where you guard your energy, okay? So if you have Vesta in Aries or the first house, you're devoted to self-mastery, but you need autonomy before getting into a very serious relationship. So you will be a bit guarded if you have your Vesta in the first. All right, you really want to focus on getting your act together, and then you'll open yourself up to a relationship. This can feel very destabilizing if you do it any other way. Now, Vesta in the second house into a Taurus, your sacred focus is on stability and self-worth in relationships. A Vesta in the third house and or Gemini, there's devotion through communication and intellectual bonds, right? Having to do with the fourth house, a Vesta in the fourth and or Cancer, family or home is your sacred space. Your intimacy life is very, very private. Now, if Vesta is in the fifth house and or Leo, devotion to creativity or romantic purity goes on here. You may idealize love. I see here a lot of people who have Vesta in the fifth. I see this a lot with my younger clients where they're saving themselves for marriage, or if they haven't saved themselves, they go into a period of deciding to practice purity, let's just say, right? Until they meet the person that they're going to end up with, right? I mean, I do, that's actually getting more common, a more common thing that I see. But again, may idealize love at the same time. So but a very nice placement nonetheless. Vesta in the sixth house or Virgo, very dedicated to service and healing within relationships. So you're not somebody who's just going to let stuff go, right? Because you're always looking to heal and make things better and problem solve, right? So it's actually a great placement in that way. Vesta in the seventh and/or Libra, you commit deeply and you seek spiritual partnership. So if you have Vesta in the seventh and/or Libra energy and you're wondering why, it's hard for you to feel really comfortable in just any old relationship, it's because you're looking for that the deep commitment. Okay, a lot of people are looking for that, but spiritual partnership is so subjective, right? Because your spirituality is your own. It's as individual as your fingerprint, right? But once you have it, man, that's a beautiful, beautiful placement. Vesta in the eighth and/or Scorpio. This is another one I see a lot, guys. Celibacy, sacred sexuality, or energy transformation themes. That is real. That is very real. Why? Because remember, Vesta is where we guard our energy, and the eighth house is the house of sex. So if you're guarding your energy, that equals celibacy, or the idea that sexuality and intimacy is very sacred, right? And it changes you. So there's nothing light, there's nothing casual about intimacy when you have Vesta in the eighth house at all. Now, when you have Vesta in the ninth house under Sagittarius, very devoted to truth, wisdom, or faith-based relationships, right? So you may be somebody who it's really difficult for you to be with somebody who does not practice the same belief system as you, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's a worldview, really difficult for you to do that. Now, if you have Vesta in the 10th house and/or Scorpio, Capricorn rather, I'm sorry, service, right? Service and some sort of calling merge. So it's like this devotion to meaningful work or a partner's success, right? So if you have your Vesta in the 10th, you could be someone who's super extra supportive of a partner's trajectory having to do with their career, right? Especially if you know that it's going to sound, because you want this merging. So you understand that if you help support your partner, this is ultimately going to benefit you as well. And there's no manipulative calculation in that. It's common sense, right? If you guys are together, and if you do better, it'll be better for them, right? I mean, but there's got to be this kind of merging energy. But you're very devoted to meaningful work as well. As a sidebar, having Vesta in there, it's very difficult for you to do something just for the paycheck. It's got to be meaningful to you, whatever it is, it's got to be meaningful. Now, Vesta is in Aquarius and/or the 11th house. That commitment to some sort of collective ideal is very important. They have to be a loyal friend to you. Like we talk about a lot of these placements as being very indicative of being, necessitating friendship. And this is definitely one of them. It's a very powerful one as well. Okay. The friendship is very important. And when it comes to Vesta in the 12th house and/or Pisces, private devotion, sacrificial or spiritual love themes. It's tricky. Vesta in the 12th, I mean, real heavy need for boundaries. You could certainly sacrifice yourself. You can hold on because the 12th house is also the house of like letting go and where we allow things to end and heal. But there could be this private holding on to that person, that relationship, you know. Nurturing something behind the scenes, right? Some sort of, secret love affair as well, right? Now, I do want to talk about HYGEIA for a second as well, even though HYGEIA does represent health, hygiene, but it also represents emotional and relational hygiene, meaning like, how to keep your love healthy, right? This healthy idea of relationship. So if you have hygeia in the first house into Aries, you attract through vitality and self-care, right? Relationship health mirrors self-health. So if your health is bad, the health of your relationship is not going to be very good either, right? There's a deep connection between that, your health and the health of the relationship, and that vitality and the ability to take care of self. Now, if Hygeia is in the second house, stability and respect for boundaries are your relational medicine. Okay, so again, that Hygeia in second house and or Taurus, stability and respect for boundaries are relational medication for you. Okay, now when we're talking about the third house and or Gemini, clear communication keeps your relationship well. Words are healing. You can't leave things unspoken, not with Hygeia in the third. Hygeia and or Gemini. Hygeia in the fourth and or Cancer, emotional housekeeping, right? You heal through family patterns. So Hygeia in Cancer or in the fourth, really cleaning out your emotional basement when it comes to your past, when it comes to your early childhood, your early experiences, or your partner might have to do this, right? Having to do with their life for your relationship to be healthy. But that is definitely like something in relationships that needs to be considered for your relationships to be really healthy. If you have Aegea in Cancer and or the fourth, right? The past plays a role in the present in relationship. So really healing that. Now, if you have Aegea in the fifth and or Leo, joy and creative play keep love vibrant and well, right? So having fun, laugh, go to a comedy club. Don't be too uptight. Don't be too serious. Make each other laugh. That is such a good stress release for your relationship. Just laughing, doing something goofy and silly, and who cares who's watching, right? To just do that, that is a really good way of keeping your relationship healthy. Now, if you have Hygeia in the sixth house and or Virgo, service and routine nurture relational health, right? You sense imbalance very quickly with Hygeia in the sixth. You sense it very quickly, which is good because it's also a place of problem solving. So addressing that right away. Now, Hygeia in the seventh and or Libra, boundaries and fairness are your love vitamins. Equality is absolutely essential. If you have Hygeia in the eighth house or Scorpio, healing through trust, honesty, shared vulnerability, super important. If you're having an issue in your relationship and you have Hygeia in the eighth and or Scorpio, the way to heal is through honesty and trust and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And I know that's hard, right? It's definitely hard with that Hygeia in the eighth because it's the house of control. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to that in order for there to be healthy healing, right? If that's what you're needing. If you have Hygeia in the ninth house and or Sagittarius, expanding perspectives can help. And also having compassion, right? Having compassion and expanding the way that you see things are ways of being able to cleanse your heart if you're having challenges in a relationship. The 10th house, if you have Hygeia in the 10th house into a Capricorn, and you need to address the health of your relationship, your model, right, for a healthy partnership, has to align, like love and integrity have to align here, right? But there is this very interesting phenomenon that happens when we have Hygeia in the 10th into a Capricorn, is you can model a very healthy partnership publicly, like in front of other people. Everything's great. We love each other, blah, 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 right? But even in private, that love and integrity, they need to align. So if your partner does something that violates your trust, it's a tough one to come back from, for sure. It just is. Some placements are a little harder. Sometimes we're like, wow, how did that person stay with that person after they did X, Y, and Z? It's like, okay, well, you don't know the person's placements, right? But if you're dealing with somebody where it's like one and done, or if you stay, man, do you hold on to it? even if you don't tell anybody, you're holding on to it. So that's just, but what's wrong with that, right? Love and integrity should align, right? They should totally align, right? And that's that hygeia in that space, because that's what you understand as being necessary for a healthy relationship. Now, if you have your hygeia in the 11th house and/or Aquarius, what's necessary if you're having any challenges to your relationships is emotional balance through friendship, through shared ideals, right? I mean, that's you have to lean on the friendship no matter what. So really, really important with Hygeia in the 11th house and/or Aquarius. Again, friendship with the partner. Now we have Hygeia in the 12th house and/or Pisces, healing through forgiveness and release and avoiding self-sabotage. Just avoiding it, right? That is that Hygeia in that space. Now, Chiron in relationship. I've done full videos on Chiron. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to connect, I was going to connect the nodes, but I'm not going to connect the nodes to relationship. Um, because they're not all connected to relationship. Truly, they're not. Unless you have your North node in the fifth house or Leo, and your South node in the 11th house or Scorpio. That axis, yes. I could tell you that that one is very deep fear of intimacy and deep fear of the absolute commitment, but it's something that you're going to have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to actually, take on and, very mindfully not take on any sort of like imbalanced energy. Get rid of that. Get rid of being imbalanced in relationship and really work on, love and happiness in relationship and allowing yourself to be open and trusting. And I guess the other one would be, Libra and Aries, or seventh house, first house, North node in the seventh house or Libra, and South node in Aries or the first house. These energies would be the realization that there's got to be a letting go or some sort of equalizing of your own sense of self and doing things for yourself, right? Well, I want to do this and I want to do that, and this is what I believe, and this is how I want to live my life. That at some point is going to have to be balanced out with like a North node in the seventh end or a Libra energy, where your destiny-driven energy is to actually open yourself up to a balanced relationship that's not only about you, but it's also about someone else. Those are the main placements. I don't know. Let me know if you want me to do like a whole other node video. I could certainly do that. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the nodes, but it would be like an even longer video. But let's talk about Chiron, because as an evolutionary astrologer, which is what I am, I look at astrology through the lens of psychology. Chiron is the most important placement in everybody's chart, just as. He's a wounded warrior. When it comes to relationships, though, I want to just about relationships. Chiron shows where you experience relational wounds and you offer healing to others. So if you have your Chiron, now I understand that in this lifetime, because Chiron is a very long transit, it's 7 years apart, right? Not everybody that's alive is going to have their Chiron in every single placement. So, for example, a lot of you right now have Chiron in Aries, and you may have Chiron in the first house. Many of you probably have your Chiron in Pisces, in Aquarius, even in Sagittarius and Capricorn. Perhaps it'll even go back to Scorpio if you're much older. A lot of you will have your Chiron in Taurus. You guys are next up for your Chiron return, which is like a pretty big deal. Chiron in Gemini and Cancer. But not all of you watching this video, or most of you watching this video, likely have your Chiron in Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and some of you Aquarius, couple of you Capricorn, right? Um, if you were born in like the 40s, you it would be in Capricorn. All right, I don't want to overspeak this, but it's very important to note not only the sign, but also the house placement. Okay. So if you have your Chiron in Aries and or the first house, this is the wound of self. So it's the wound around self-worth or visibility in love. There's got to be healing through self-acceptance. That is the trickiest part of having this placement in a relationship, is that you into real deep feel like there's something wrong with you. It just means before the age of 8, you did not get built up in the way that you needed on a soul level. This is not about anything being wrong with your parents. It's about we all have our own souls. We're very spongy up to the age of 8. And, something compromised your sense of self, right? And your identity, right? Your self-worth and self-love. So that's the tricky part of having the Chiron in Aries right now. Now, Chiron in Taurus and or the second house, there could be pain from feeling undervalued, healing through self-esteem and generosity. That's where the healing comes in. This is where you could be very healing to other people, but it's where your greatest pain is, okay? In that house of worth, in the house of self, right? So having Chiron and Taurus under the second house, maybe you struggled with finances when you were younger. Maybe you struggle with the sense of self and self-esteem, right? These are things that could happen there. Chiron in the third house under a Gemini, wounds in communication. There could have been a lot of wounds from your family. You could have been scapegoated a lot. There could have been challenges to your early education. And for this, there's healing through learning, though, to speak your truth, learning to speak your truth unconditionally. And that will help you in all of your relationships, because that is where your deepest wound is. If Chiron is in Cancer and or the fourth house, family or childhood pain impacts attachment. So there's healing through emotional security. If you have your Chiron in Cancer and or the fourth, that is where a big pain is for you, having to do with your first family, having to do with emotional security in one way or another. The way to heal it is to find and figure out a way, especially through relationship, to feel that emotional safety and security. Now, if your Chiron is in the fifth and or Leo, there could be a real fear of rejection or creative vulnerability, right? That can impact your relationship. So here, there could be a lot of healing through play and love expression and being seen and respected, right? Where you're able to talk about these things, right? Because if you have your Chiron in Leo or the fifth, there was a point in your life where you wanted to be seen and you wanted to be recognized, right? It's the placement of the entertainer, of the hey, look at me. It's very connected to childhood as well. So maybe you weren't recognized as powerfully in your childhood as you needed to be, whatever it is. But if you are getting that through your relationships, it's so healing. Now, if you have Chiron in the sixth house and or Virgo, self-sacrifice or overwork in love can be a thing. So healing through boundaries and self-care can be just so magical for you guys. Absolutely. Now, if you have Chiron in the seventh house and or Libra, relationship wounds around equality or rejection become very apparent at some certain point. So healing through conscious partnerships where you're very mindful of what it is that you're doing. You're not trying to play out this cat and mouse game when it comes to equality or rejection within a relationship, because there are a lot of wounds there, a lot of wounds around that space, a lot of wounds connected to how you experienced your parents' relationship and how you have likely connected that energy, whether you realize it or not, to the way you understand relationships, in your life. When it comes to Chiron in the eighth house and or Scorpio, this is a heavy one. Betrayal or abandonment themes. There could be anything having to do with, when I say betrayal, it could be like sexual betrayal. Abandonment can be connected to people passing away when they're young. Because it's eighth house, it could be through unaliving themselves. I can't say the other word, right? Because YouTube will not, allow it to play, but you know what I mean? I think that's what they say these days, unaliving themselves. Um, there's a darkness with that, but what's connected to that, that could be in a past life or it could be in an early part of your life. But the whole thing about that, it's control. And when you have Chiron in the eighth house into Scorpio, you are very sensitive to anybody trying to control you. You're very sensitive to rejection. So healing here, that abandonment, right? You gotta be very careful there. So there's a lot of healing through trust and emotional rebirth. There's a lot of healing through therapy. So going with like couples counseling can be a real game changer. Learning more about yourself through astrology, because eighth house rules astrology as well. And astrology can be an actual vehicle that will allow you to really learn the intricate part of yourselves, to have that emotional rebirth, to make you be or help you to be anyway, a different version of yourself in relationship. And then we have Chiron in the ninth house and or Sagittarius. So wounds around beliefs or cultural differences in love. Wounds connected to father energy can also show up here. So the healing here, it happens through openness and truth. Remember, the ninth house is the house of truth, right? So openness and just absolute honesty is the way to go. There's no other way around it. Now, Chiron in the 10th house into a Capricorn, this is about wounds connected to how people know you, right? And the healing happens through authentic leadership in love. So having agency in love, taking the bull by the horns and saying, you know what? Maybe this is how I'm known. Maybe this is how people know our relationship to be. Maybe this is the kind of, because a lot of times, Chiron in the 10th, it could be, all right, how are you known? And because we're talking about relationships, maybe you're divorced and there's a wound around that, or there's some sort of wound that's buried very deeply connected to mother energy and it's impacting your relationships. These are things, right, that come up to look at. But the more that you can have agency over that, where you could say, okay, this is part of my story. This is what happened to me. This is something I need to really unpack, right? That's very healing in your relationships. Now, if you have Chiron in the 11th house and or Aquarius, feeling excluded, healing through belonging and true friendship, especially in relationship, but finding that belonging somewhere, and feeling excluded, just like feeling just generally in your life. So if you think about it, if you felt excluded maybe in friend groups, or you felt excluded because of family situations, whatever, you felt what is that feeling? You know what I'm saying? That feeling that doesn't go away. The situation might pass, but that feeling of feeling left out, not wanted, that's tough. We bring that into relationships because then it's like, all right, if I feel unwanted, that might be really difficult to exercise a lot of solid self-respect. And then if you don't have that, then maybe you're trying to overcompensate or you're not respecting yourself enough, right? So you just want to think about that in relationship. If you have your Chiron in the 11th house and or Aquarius, Chiron in the 12th house and or Pisces, this is deep, deep, deep karmic pain. Healing through forgiveness and spiritual surrender. But I want to be really clear when I say spiritual surrender, because it doesn't mean I give up, I give up, I give up. It's not that. Spiritual surrender is about conscious forgiveness. It's about recognizing um, a debt owed spiritually by energies in your life, be it a parent, be it a sibling, because it is the wound of betrayal and trust, right? Having to do with that 12th house into Pisces energy. It's that wound of betrayal and trust. So what happened, right? What happened to cause that betrayal? What happened to challenge that trust? Lay it out, look at it. Don't squish it down. Don't hold on to it too tightly. I'm never going to forgive you. I'm never going to trust. No, no, no. That's just silly. What you have to do is you have to kind of lay out the debt that's owed for being betrayed, for not being remembered, for being sidelined in life, right? And labeling it and saying this, which is what I feel like happened at this part, and this point of my life. Because if you don't do that, you're going to hold on to that bitterness in all of your relationships. So we have to be very careful of that, right? Of not holding on to that, of not holding on to, if you felt scapegoated, forgotten, lied to, sidelined, whatever, betrayed, whatever it is. Figure out what they did, call it, and then and you don't even have to tell them. You just do it with yourself. You have to, I'm not going to say it's easy because it's not an act, it's a process. Forgiveness is not a one and done deal. It's not an act, it's a process. But to start the process in saying, I am making the decision to forgive that person, doesn't mean forgetting, forgive that situation and just move on. I'm not going to allow it to have power in my life anymore. It's not worth it. This has nothing to do with still allowing that energy in your life, because if they're really toxic and disrespectful to you, you don't have to let them in. You can love them from across the street, but you can heal that, because that is one that I see over and over and over again. Yes, that 12th house Pisces, first house Aries, second house Taurus, really difficult to escape because those are very deep. And of course, they're going to end up impacting how you do relationship and how easy it is or not easy to trust. So I hope this was helpful going through all of these discussions with you. Again, if you want the nodes, I'll do the nodes. The nodes are super important in evolutionary astrology. That's actually the second thing that we look at. Happy to do it. But guys, this is a wrap on today's deep dive into how we experience love through the stars. And remember, every chart tells a story, and understanding your placements help you love with more awareness, with more compassion, and with a lot more confidence. So whether it's your Venus showing what you value, or your Mars showing how you go after it, whatever it is, it's all connected. So if you like this breakdown that I gave, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next video. And we'll be unpacking more and more as we go along here about relationships, about intimacy, about soul connections through astrology. A lot of you have been asking for it, so I'm going to give you what you're asking for. So thank you so much for watching. And until next time, keep looking up, keep loving deeply, and keep learning from the stars. Okay, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.